Hey there, this is Manisha Kadagatur, partner at Zephyr Consulting Services and your host. In an earlier episode on housing societies during the COVID 19 lockdown, a management committee member told me
In a housing society, everybody is a CEO, everybody has an equal right.
with egos that large, getting anyone to coalesce takes a lot of energy and time. That's where Srikanth had his first brush with public service, bringing together 1,000 housing societies representing 6 lakh residents to band together. My guest today is Srikanth Narsimhan, the co-founder and general secretary of Bengaluru NavaNirmana Party (BNP), the past general secretary of Bangalore Apartment Federation, and the founder director of Veda Corporate Advisors. In his earlier avatar, he worked in companies like ICICI Venture, E&Y, and Tata Motors. He is an engineer from BITS Pilani and a management graduate from IIM Bangalore. Today, it is Bangalore that his heart bleeds for. I began by asking Srikanth how he came to serve his city and how he managed to coalesce 6 lakh residents to come together for a common cause.
At the core, I think we all are selfish. Till the time we are not directly impacted by something, we do not respond. I was living in a cocoon in my apartment complex, and many of us have been living in our cocoons. It takes something to bring out that animal instinct out, right? And that holds good for me. I guess that holds good for you, probably for almost all of us. So the reason why we actually formed a federation like Bangalore Apartments Federation was because the apartment residents and the apartment communities were being impacted. The apartment communities were being harassed by various civic agencies and officials and the government. And I think that's really what brought us together in the first place. We were becoming scapegoats, we were becoming the sitting ducks for everything that was going wrong in the system. So it ended up becoming higher and higher tariff for apartment residents compared to individual houses, higher and higher cesses compared to individual houses, the blame on lake pollution being put on apartment complexes, the blame on landfills being put on apartment complexes. This despite apartment community being the most socially responsible community in the city. So penalties and impossible conditions. And I think that's really what brought us together. But then it was very difficult to get people to come together. Despite all of this, people at some level are cynical. They don't believe that we can come together, or if we're able to come together, things can happen. So I realized that we should build up something very professionally in the form of a proper organization with proper employees, targets, sales pitches, and actual results to be delivered on the ground. So once we started working on some of the issues that were impacting complexes, once we started delivering some results on the ground, automatically the numbers started expanding. It was a gradual process, it was a tough process, it was a tiring process, but gradually we didn't lose hope. We gradually kept on building it step by step. And before we knew it, we were close to 1,000 apartment complexes. It's a very vibrant community today. It's a community which is becoming more and more socially responsible. We actually started getting people to do a lot of interesting things. So while I said people are selfish, it's also true that at a fundamental level, each of us have an innate passion for doing something good. So we wanted to tap into that also. So whether it was responsible solid waste management or contributing to the environment through rooftop solar or just engaging responsibly with downtrodden communities in our neighborhoods, etc. So we started launching a number of other programs which got people to stay connected on various activities. What brought us together was something that directly impacted us, but what's keeping us together is a sense of purpose and a sense of contributing to the society and making a difference.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So the reason why people would join something like this is that there is more bargaining power with the authorities, and there is strength in numbers. Is that the primary reason why people would band together?
Absolutely. At the fundamental level, if you look at it, whether it's a trade union or organizations that are involved in lobbying, trade bodies, including the CIIs of the world, ultimately all of this is about banding together to represent one's own cause. And I think Bangalore Apartments Federation was no different or is no different. We wanted the apartment communities to come together so that it acts as a powerful force to act against all these harassments, and also to push for sensible policies and sensible rules to be put in place such that we are not impacted directly. So you're right. It's about that sense of coming together and having that power to make sure that we are not harassed and we can truly make a difference by being together.
That's very interesting. So, for something like this to work, and you mentioned that idea was to put together a professional body with employees, goal sheets, and stuff like that. How would an organization like this be funded?
See, in the case of the Bangalore Apartments Federation, we charged a membership fees for each of the members to become a member of the federation. So with that, we were able to generate a lot of resources. And as we started growing in size, there were a lot of vendors who started coming and entering into sponsorship deals and all that. But ultimately, a federation like that, which has members, it easily survives and thrives on membership fees. But when it comes to NGOs and political organizations, that's where the challenge becomes slightly bigger. So more of that later. But for the federation, we were always clear that we were going to charge a membership fee on the apartment complexes. And today, with almost about 1,000 apartment complexes, on an average, if you were to look at even 3,000 rupees per apartment complex, it's about 30 lakhs per annum, which is a very, very good amount to work with.
At this point, the story takes another turn. Srikanth made the shift to founding a political party. How did that happen?
Till about 5 years back, I was an individual who held an extremely strong view that voting is one of the most useless things that we can ever do. And I had never voted in my life before that because my view was the choice is between the devil and the deep blue sea. So what's the point of voting? You're going to elect one crook, or rather the choice was between one crook versus another crook. I think that's the point of view that I held till I started Bangalore Apartment Federation. Through the federation, when I started interacting with the officials, the elected representatives, with the government authorities or the MLAs and some of the ministers, I think the standard response that came from every single person was, you guys living in apartment complexes, you do not vote. And hence you have no right to ask any questions or be answered. And more importantly, they almost told us in those words that you deserve to be harassed. That was an eye-opening moment for me and for many of us. We realized that by not voting, the kind of deleterious impact that we were causing and the problems that we were inflicting upon ourselves. So from that point onwards, I was a convert. I became a voter. And not only did I become a voter, I started convincing many others to start voting, because even if you're voting for the existing guys, if we do not vote, they do not consider us as vote bank and hence start doing these nonsensical things. So I think that was the first big shift that happened in my life, from being a non-voter to becoming a voter. Then another important event that happened in my life is, I told you about that one impossible condition that the government body had put on us, asking older apartments to install sewage treatment plants, which was practically impossible. We kept on fighting that battle for a year. We tried reason, logic, we went to the courts, we tried all sorts of things. 1 year of intense battle yielded nothing. And finally, we decided that as citizens, we need to come together and protest. I still remember the date, 2nd December 2017. We got apartment residents to come out and stand outside their gates as a protest. 10,000 people from across the city came out and stood carrying placards, from children to senior citizens. And believe it or not, within 2 weeks, December 14th to be precise, the entire government machinery, which was not even willing to listen to us, was on its knees. They came to us, they asked us, what do you want? So there was a meeting organized where the Bangalore Development Minister, the Home Minister, the Mayor, the Commissioner of the Municipal Corporation, the Chairman of the Water Supply Board, the Chairman of the Pollution Control Board, everybody in one single meeting asking us, what do we want? And we said, we want the rule to be reversed. In 1 minute, the rule was reversed. That was an eye-opening moment for me, right? It showed to me that people power works. And the only power that works is people power. So that was the second big shift that happened. So effectively, that was one trigger that made us go for more and more membership within that Bangalore Apartment Federation. We realized that power is in numbers. Power is in the strength that we have. So that was the second big shift that happened. And the third big shift for me that happened was, while we were doing all these initiatives that I talked about, water conservation, waste management, etc., as apartments, all the apartments segregate waste 100%. But the contractors, who were pretty much binamis of the elected representatives, the corporators, the MLAs, they used to come and mix it and dump it in lakes and landfills. And slowly, what we started doing was we found 2 or 3 good professional vendors who actually then take the waste separately and dispose it in an environment friendly manner. When we started doing that, these contractors, and more importantly, their bosses, those corporators and MLAs, I still remember one incident where that corporator actually called up an apartment complex and threatened them with dire consequences. That if we start sending it to another agency which is going to do it in that manner, which was going to deprive them of business, they said they will disconnect power to us, they will dig up the roads in front of our house, they will ask pollution control board to issue notices. All kinds of threats started coming. And that's the big turning point that happened for me, where I realized that the elected representatives, not only were they not doing their job, they were actually actively working towards destroying the city for their personal and nefarious gains. And I can't say that that one incident changed everything, but a series of incidents like that convinced me that we, the good citizens, need to get into politics to bring about change. We as citizens, we can do our bit, but it comes only up to a level. Beyond that, the elected representatives, they just don't care. And if we do not get into that system, if we do not try to get into governance and bring about that change, we realize that our city is doomed. So that was my entry and the entry of many of us into the politics of Bengaluru.
Wow, what an entry. Tell me, Srikanth, what will you do and what won't you do?
Right. So Bengaluru NavaNirmana Party is a party of, by, and for the citizens of Bengaluru, with a very, very razor sharp focus on Bengaluru and its municipal governance. So what we will do is we will first work for transparency. We want all the projects and all the accounts of the municipal corporation to be transparent. And believe it or not, again, without even we getting into governance, we actually got into the BBMP system, pulled out various projects one by one, and today we have already made 63,629 BBMP projects over the last 5 years public, transparent, and made it open to the public. So without even getting into governance, what was not available to the public, we have already made it public. So we want to bring transparency to the city on the projects and the accounts. Second, we want to make sure that citizens participate in governance and in decision making. And that's the whole essence of municipal governance. Citizens of each ward need to decide what are the things they need, what are the projects they want to be taken up, and they need to have an active say in the decision making process of which project should be approved and taken up. So we want to involve citizens in that process of governance at the ward level, not at a larger level. The third thing that we want to do is the quality of the work is pathetic because of corruption, because of misgovernance, because the intent of the elected representatives is to make money for themselves. We want to make sure that proper work gets done on the ground, whether it's laying of roads, cleaning of drains, fixing of footpaths. Since they are done in a very shoddy manner, the same thing keeps happening year after year. So every year they fix a pothole, it becomes a pothole again. They fix a road, it becomes horrible again. So it's the same thing that they keep doing again and again, which we want to change. So these are the things that we want to do for sure. What we will not do is, given that our focus is only on Bengaluru, we will not contest the MP elections or MLA elections. We will contest only the municipal elections. Given that we are focused only on municipal governance, we will not take a stance on state issues or national issues. Farmers Bill, Farmers Suicide, Citizenship Amendment Act, Article 370, these are of course important issues, but nothing to do with grassroots governance. So we will not take a stance on any of those issues. We will take a stance only on issues relating to garbage, drains, roads, potholes, footpaths, streetlights, lakes, trees, health, etc. And lastly, we will not polarize people on any count. Today, there is too much of polarization that has happened in politics, whether it's at the city level, state level, national level, or even globally. Politics is completely polarized. So we will not polarize people on any count: gender, strata, ethnicity, religion, caste, nothing of that sort. Our humble attempt and our only focus is to unite people for the cause of good grassroots governance. So those are the things that we will definitely do, and those are the things that we will definitely not do, Manisha.
Okay, so that's a very passionate plea that you have made. Who are the core members of this party?
Core members, we are still in the process of building up the core team. It's more than a year into our existence. So originally it started off with a bunch of like-minded people from different groups. I came from Bangalore Apartment Federation. There was an individual who came from an organization called as Whitefield Rising, a person called Srinivas. There's a lady who joined us from an organization called Citizens for Bengaluru, Priya Chetty Rajagopal. There's another lady who was running a solid waste management organization called Hasiru Mitra in her area, Lalitamba. So it's people like us who all came together initially to start this up. But our core team is continuously expanding. There is a central core team comprising the governing council, and then we also have the ward level core teams. So there are people who've been very, very active in their resident welfare associations, apartment associations, people who've been active in their local civic activities and civic issues. So they're all coming in as part of the leadership teams of the respective wards. So they are also very much part of the core teams in their wards. So there are 198 wards in Bengaluru. Each ward will have its own core team. And then centrally, we are building up a core team, which today comprises about 15 people. We want to expand that to about 25 to 30 people. And in the same way, in every ward, with those like-minded citizens, we want to constitute a team of 15, 20, 25, 30 people who will constitute the core team in each ward. So each ward to have a core team comprising the active citizens of that area, of that ward, who've been active in the resident welfare associations, the apartment associations, involved in civic issues, civic activities, etc. And at the central level, people who've been involved in the larger causes of Bengaluru for governance, who are all part of the core team.
This is a bunch of like minded individuals trying to come together because you feel strongly about Bangalore, right? Now,
Absolutely.
people change, times change. How will you make sure that everyone is sticking to the original ideology?
No easy answers, but here is my perspective on this. So first up, since we are a city-focused party, I believe there is no scope for power-hungry people to be part of the system because there's no logical step up for people to then contest in the MLA elections and MP elections. In fact, conversely, I would like to believe that given that we are focused only on the municipal body and the municipal elections, we'll be able to attract only the grassroots citizens who are honest and passionate about what they want to do in their neighborhood and locality. So I think that's one important aspect of why we believe we will not go the way of the other parties. Second, the concept which I alluded to just prior to this also is we are building up teams in every ward. Instead of having one individual as a corporator, of course, one individual will become the elected corporator, but we are looking at working on a concept of corporator teams where various individuals who have been actively working in the ward, they all come together, and among them, they select one person who will contest as the corporator. And what that effectively means is even post elections, this individual who gets elected as a corporator is answerable to the rest of the team members and to the citizens of the ward. And what we've been telling people is that for one person to shoulder all the responsibility is virtually impossible. So let the responsibility of getting the work done be shared by the various team members of that ward. In the same way, too much of power vesting in an individual is dangerous too. So we want that power also to be distributed among the team members and the citizens so that we are not tomorrow held ransom by an individual who starts doing things the way he or she wants to.
So, collective decision making, you're saying teams coming together, power not resting in one single individual. These are your safeguards from going off track.
Absolutely. And I think that will definitely help us to stay away from the plague that has plagued the other parties. And lastly, we're also setting a framework for what we are expecting out of a corporator who wins from the BNP platform. We are saying that that person has to adhere to the principles of transparency, involving citizens, holding monthly meetings, doing ward walks on a regular basis, engaging with citizens. And if somebody fails to do this on a consistent basis and starts indulging in things that he or she should not be doing, we have told our teams very clearly that we will not hesitate to publicly disown them and probably even shame them if we find something that they have done completely wrong, including any kind of corruption or any kind of misgovernance. So we believe that that fear of their name being publicly shamed by a party that has actually fielded them is another deterrent that will prevent them from doing it. So these are the safeguards that we are putting in place. Will this completely safeguard us? I don't think so. But does it minimize the probability to a significant extent? I think so.
The success rate as a politician also is fairly low because there are just so many moving parts all
Yeah.
the time. I mean, what keeps you going with something like that?
It's a question for which there are no easy answers. But here are again some very fundamental philosophical elements that I come from. Yes, it's an extremely tough journey. Success in politics is very, very tough, and there are lots of failed ventures, as you call them. But when I look at the number of ventures and the kind of ventures that have failed in politics, the problem is there are very few people who have actually stayed the course for the long run. I've seen many parties come in. One election they try out. If they fail, they become disheartened and start moving on. And my belief is that if you are looking at building an organization in the corporate sector, you don't have overnight success. You build it up over a long period of time. If you're building up an NGO, you build it up over a long period of time. And the same holds good for a political party as well. We need to have a long-term perspective. So we're trying to build this party for the long run. Number two, while we are a political party, we want to win elections, we want to get into power, and we want to bring about change. What we also have to remember is that just the fact that we are going to be here, and if we start winning a few thousand votes, even if we do not win an election, I think we'll start making an impact. Because the moment we start winning votes, it starts putting pressure on the others. So that's why I think I made this point earlier too. I look at power as the means to an end. Our end is not about getting into power. Yes, it's a very important aspect of delivering governance, but it's not the only aspect of delivering governance. So even if we are not able to, let's say, win many wards in the first election, for the moment, let's assume that we win only 20-30 wards in the first election. We will show in those 20-30 wards what is it that we can do. And in the wards that we do not win, we continue to keep putting pressure on the people who get elected and the parties who are in power to keep bringing about change. The one thing I can tell you straight away is that even without having contested a single election, by making all those projects transparent, we have already brought in a revolution to Bengaluru. People are shocked. People are amazed. They now realize how we as citizens, since we have not been participating, we've been taken for a ride. So we are trying to bring in those elements, whether we win 10 wards, 100 wards, 200 wards, I think we can still bring about that change. So I think these are the two things that I would say are extremely important to have in mind when we are looking at success of a political venture. We can't have a short-term thinking. If we come in with the perspective that, oh, we want to contest one election, we'll see how it goes. If we don't do well, we pack up our bags and go away. That's not going to work. Political parties take time to build up to a large scale and to a mass scale. Of course, there are cases where things have happened faster, and we hope it happens for us also. But if it doesn't happen, we are here to fight it out for the long run. And second, as long as we are clear that we are fighting for governance and not just about opposing other political parties for the sake of opposing them, just trying to think about how to get into power and win elections, but at a larger level focus on governance, I think we'll be able to bring about a big impact. So the only thing that I want to say is, unlike a corporate venture where the only metric of success is whether you've been able to create value, here there are multiple metrics of success, and we believe that we, without even winning elections, we can drive change. And I think that's a huge motivator. We have done that through citizen groups and citizen organizations. I believe that we can do it through political organizations as well.
A lot of what you say requires adequate firepower or money power to keep it going.
Yeah.
So how do you get your source of funds? Where does it come from?
It'll be all crowdfunded. The citizens of Bengaluru, since it's a party of, by, and for the citizens of Bengaluru, we want the citizens of Bengaluru to contribute money to this party and to this venture. And again, whether you want to believe it or not, just through my own sources, people I have known, I've been able to mobilize about 50 lakhs of rupees. 50 lakhs of rupees, you might say it's not a lot of money in the political context, but given that in the municipal elections, we need only a few lakhs of rupees to contest each ward. And since we are not going to pay money to buy votes, it's a lot of money. And once we start expanding our circles, we believe we need only a few lakhs in each ward to contest the elections in a very serious manner. And which means all that we need is a few crores of rupees to be raised for the party to contest an election, which I think we are extremely confident of. Look at it this way: in a ward, if 1,000 people contribute about 1,000 rupees each ward has a population of something like 60 to 70,000. And out of that, if 1,000 people contribute 1,000 rupees each, that's 10 lakhs of rupees. And that math is amazing for many people. With 10 lakhs, we can contest the elections of a ward very, very seriously. And that's all that we need. And apart from that, we have HNIs and ultra HNIs who are also willing to contribute. So I think funding is something which is very important, and it's not going to be easy. But I think we should be able to cross that bridge, not comfortably, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult either.
What are the tools that you have in your arsenal to engage and to make sure that governance finally takes place?
In my citizen avatar as the General Secretary of Bangalore Apartment Federation, I realized that there were only two things that makes the government work: either a citizen protest or a high court order. I believe that if people are made aware, I believe that if people can be brought together, if people can be involved in the whole process, we don't need to do anything more than that. The presence of citizens and people in governance at the first level, by knowing what's happening, it creates huge pressure on politicians and political parties. Second, the fact that they are there as a group. I told you about Bangalore Apartment Federation, but now in the context of Bengaluru NavaNirmana Party, if a few thousand people vote for us in a ward, and even if we are not able to win the ward through that, the fact that so many thousand people supported us puts pressure on the other political parties. That's the second part. And the third part, if citizens together start demanding that the projects be made transparent, please tell us which contractor you're going to engage, and some of this information we've already made public, it creates an even higher level of pressure on the politicians and political parties. And I believe that the path of governance is 70 to 80% covered through that itself.
No, the reason I asked that question, Srikanth, is that before this, I was actually talking to Nitin Pai, director of Takshashila Institution. And he had an interesting point of view in terms of how people can engage with public policy. One, of course, is getting into the government, which is what you're doing. The second one was in terms of the research and the intellectual conversation around public policy. And the third one is the citizen involvement. Now, what I can see is that you're mobilizing part 1 and part 3. So therefore, my question to you was from that angle, saying, what are the other tools in your arsenal while you are setting up this with a very clear agenda? You know that you want to limit it only to Bangalore, you wanted to limit it only to the municipal elections, and there are multiple issues. So are you engaging with others, or is that even on the table, or how does that work for you?
Here is one interesting facet for you. When we talk of public policy, I think it's more relevant at the state level and at the national level. When it comes to city governance, the emphasis is very clearly on execution, not so much on public policy. There are very few things that the council, the municipal council, actually gets involved in from the perspective of creating a policy or an act or a rule. The reason why the municipal council exists with corporators is not so much to frame public policy or acts or laws, but it's actually to get things executed on the ground. There are definitely certain aspects of public policy that we need to get involved in from a municipal council perspective, but I would say that's hardly 10 to 20% of it. When you come to the state level and national level, policy is probably 70, 80, 90%. And that's where I keep harping on citizen involvement and participation. Today, within our party and within the city, there are people who are taking up local issues and resolving that with the help of officials. You don't need a public policy for that. To set right your drains, your footpaths, your street lights, or putting a park in place or cleaning that up, we don't need policy for that. Yes, at a larger level, when you're looking at solid waste management, you need to have a policy for that without any doubt. If you want to have a lake restoration or a rejuvenation process to be put in place, you need a policy for that. But as I said, that's hardly 10-20% of the overall work that the municipal council executes. And with regard to policy, yes, there are a few people at the central level, and we do interact with organizations like a Takshashila or a Janagraha or a BPAC, and there are many other organizations which are think tanks to figure out how do we solve these larger level problems at the city level as well.
And when is the next municipal election actually?
Technically, it should have been held by now, been postponed. Hopefully, in the next few months, 3 to 6 months is what we're thinking.
Actively be involved with is increasing the number of voters, registered voters actually coming out and voting. Is that one of the things that you're looking at?
Absolutely. We are running a campaign called Kevala Matavalla. Kevala Matavalla in Kannada means not just a vote. We are encouraging every single citizen of Bengaluru who is not registered on the electoral rolls in Bengaluru to do so ASAP. Today there's an online process and an offline process. And I firmly believe that the urban middle class, which has not been participating so much in the municipal elections. And here is one interesting statistic for you. As such, voting percentages in Bengaluru are pretty bad. In the MLA and MP elections, the voting percentages are somewhere in the range of about 60%. But when it comes to municipal elections, the voting percentage dips to actually closer to 40%. So there is a 20% segment of the population which actually is voting in the MP and MLA election, which is not voting during the municipal elections because they don't even know that there is something called as a municipal election.
There, Srikanth hit the nail on the head. Many of us move away from our hometowns for education and then work, and rarely travel back to participate in the municipal elections. This is one of the reasons why corporators are able to get away because a large section of urban middle class is absent from the voter base.
So we want to improve that awareness about the municipal election and get more and more people to register. And if that 20% comes out and votes, I believe that BNP can actually win 130 to 140 wards out of 200 wards. And I think that's the impact that they can bring about if that 20% comes out and votes during the municipal elections. And we are pulling out all stops to get them to be aware and get them to be registered on the rolls and get them to come out and vote.
Awesome. Okay, so how do you involve women and children into something like this? So householders, how are you involving them?
The municipal elections, I don't know whether you know this, at least in Bengaluru, 50% of the wards are reserved for women. So in the wards reserved for women, men cannot contest. So out of 198 wards that are there, in 99 wards, we have women corporators. And it's a national tragedy. It's a national shame. And it's, in my view, an insult to all the women of this country that these 99 women corporators are remote controlled by their husbands. It's an absolute shame on all of us that we have allowed things to come to a pass. If in a particular ward, it becomes reserved for women, the guy who wanted to contest, he makes his wife contest the election, gets her to win the election, and remote controls her. Such a travesty of democracy, in my view. So what we are doing in BNP is we are getting women who've been actively working on the ground on lake rejuvenation, solid waste management, and other civic issues to be part of the party and convincing them that they need to contest the election. So tomorrow, if somebody believes that I am the right candidate to contest from my ward, but it becomes reserved for women, my wife will not, cannot, should not contest the elections. It should be a competent lady in our ward who should contest the elections. That's the ethos that we are building, and we are building a team of fantastic women. Today in our core group, you'll be very happy to know this, more than 50% are women. And that's the power that we want to bring to this part. So that's number one on the women's front. On the youth front, we have created a separate youth wing called BNP NavaYuva, New Youth. It's actually headed by a 21-year-old boy. I take great pride today in calling him somebody as part of our leadership team. He's all of 21 years old, Rishwanjas Raghavan, Rishi. He's leading that youth team. Youth today are extremely confident. They are extremely aware of what's happening around them and the issues that are plaguing the city, and they want to take an active part in government. So we are actually doing a very specific outreach to the youth of this city. He talks about the 4 E's, educating the youth about the importance of the municipal body and governance, then enrolling them into a political unit, to then envisioning a model for the city where we get them to take part in policy and being part of a think tank and research, and finally to empowering them to deliver governance for this wonderful city of ours. So there is a separate youth wing which is working exclusively to building up the youth brigade, the Nava Yuva for BNP. So I'm very confident that women and youth are going to play an extremely important role in BNP, in BBMP, and in Bengaluru in the years to come.
All right, Srikanth, what's your elevator pitch?
We can choose to stay away from politics. Politics will not choose to stay away from us. So the sooner we realize that, the sooner we take an active interest and an active part. We don't need to get onto the ground and start doing things. But the moment we start exercising our franchise and casting our vote, I think change starts from there. Governance begins from there. I used to be that citizen who used to think that voting has no meaning, right? And from there, if I've made a journey where I've gotten into active politics and actively working towards bringing about change in the city, I think every citizen can make that at least at one step forward and say, I definitely want to participate in the governance process. I want to participate in the electoral process. I want to participate in bringing about change to our neighborhoods, our locality.
That's it from me. I'm Manisha Kadagatur. Thank you for listening.